throw out some numbers to you, and I'd love to get your reaction to. According to Fulton County Court Administration, through a public records request, there were about 1,232 individuals at the jail as of August of this year who had not been indicted. Commissioner Ellis just 2 days ago talked about the unindicted at the jail, and he referenced 521 inmates at the jail that have been there more than 90 days who are unindicted. 60 of them have been there more than a year. And he said, quote, "If that's not pretty disturbing data, I don't know what is." What's your reaction to that?
That Commissioner Ellis is not a supporter of criminal justice, is ignorant, doesn't know what he's talking about most days, and is just not really trying to make himself informed of the issues or the progress. That would be my reaction to that statement. People have to be realistic about what was here when we arrived, what the crime rates were just post-pandemic, and then realistic about the resources it will take to deal with the issues. And so typically I don't rely that heavily on the data they give. I do get data from the clerk, as you have done, to make sure that we're always accurate on what the data is, how we're moving forward, and what the progress is. But that would be my general reaction. I hope we're going to talk about it in more detail, though.
So what is the accurate number? It's according to the court administration, it's 1,200.
So the last time that I looked at the data, it was right around 1,200 for unindicted defendants in jail. About 800 of those defendants were 90 days or less, right? So that would put you at about 400, doing basic math, that are more than 90 days. But first of all, you have to understand what's the relevance of that. There's not relevance to that in terms of they want to give you a false narrative. And the false narrative they want to give you is that if someone is unindicted, that means they don't have access to bond or to freedom. That's not correct. And so we have to deal with that. Do you understand what I mean when I say that? The commissioners have tried to paint this picture that somehow incarceration and indictment tie hand in hand, and they don't. The only thing 90 days does is say by law, at 90 days, if one is not indicted, they're entitled to a bond. So it's really counterintuitive, the argument that they're making in general. You have to deal with what it was when we got here. We got here on January the 1st of 2021. When we got here on January the 1st of 2021, there were more than 18,000 cases unindicted, more than 18,000. Very well documented. Don't have to rely on me. You can rely on the clerk for that particular number. That's January 1st of 2021, 18,000 cases unindicted. Those cases went back to the year of 2012, really. But even if you dealt with back to 2014, because that's the number that they have the data is active today, 2014 to 2021. So you had unindicted cases going back for 7 years not dealt with. Some of it was caused by the pandemic, right? In 2020, cases could not be indicted. There was no grand jury here, although there could have been investigations done. They weren't. Really, the ship was just abandoned in 2020. Since that historical time, we have cut the backlog by about 5,000 cases. Now, I don't want you to think that means we only did those 18,000 cases. The first number I want you to...
So I want to make sure the 18,000 you're talking about is, as of last year, it was unindicted, 18,000 unindicted?
So let's make sure we're talking.
Sure,
yeah. So we get here January 1st, 2021. Okay. So from January, from 2014, to January the 1st of 2021, 18,000 unindicted. So December 31st, 2020, we'll say, right?
Okay.
So from 2014 to 2020, in excess of 18,000 cases unindicted. That had occurred over that 6-7 year period, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, December 31st of 2020. As you sit here right now, there are none of those cases unindicted, zero. So that entire backlog was cleared. It was cleared either by indicting a case, accusing a case, or declining a case for want of prosecution, for there not being enough evidence. The other thing is, in the old administration, they would take whatever the police faxed over and they would simply indict. There was no investigation to it. We changed completely the way we did business, meaning that prior to someone being indicted, we had to actually have the evidence. That sounds novice to people, but they were not doing that. So a drug case could get indicted and you didn't have a drug lab to prove the drugs that the police had alleged. Anyone could be indicted of anything just based on a fact statement. That no longer happens. All 18,000 of those cases were cleared.
So all those 18,000 were cleared, but there's still 12,000.
Well, we need to talk about the real numbers, okay? Then you have all of the cases that happened in 21, all of the cases that happened in 22, and all of the cases that happened in 23. So we have historically cleared that out while cutting the overall backlog down to, and we're at about 11,700 right now of cases unindicted. Now you asked me about cases in the jail, which is 1,200 cases in the jail, or give or take a number. 800 of them are within the last 90 days. The rest are more than 90 days. Sometimes cases take more investigation than others. Sometimes we have not had all of the resources we needed to actually get to the case.
How many did you say were within the past 90 days? I'm sorry.
About 800.
About 800.
Right, just shy. I just counted it about 2 days ago.
Okay. The numbers that the commission reported on just yesterday were there were 521 90 days plus, 60 waiting more than a year.
So their numbers are wrong. As we sit here today, I can't speak of August, the numbers that they gave you, but what I'm telling you is I have reports pulled regularly, and as I pulled the report, I hand counted how many of these are less than 90 days, and we were just shy of 800.
Do you have any that have been waiting longer than 90 days?
Absolutely. If you do the math, if you say there's 800 that are 90 days,
Any
you certainly have some that are over 90 days, yes.
Any longer than a year?
There probably were a couple that were longer than a year, yes. A smaller number, of course, a smaller subset, but yes.
Let's switch gears and table the unindicted for a second, and let's talk about just individuals in the jail that have been waiting for their trial date, waiting for their day in court. According to the numbers that the sheriff provided me just last week, there were 19 people that have been in the jail 5 years or longer, 142 3 years or longer. Why is it taking so long to get to trial?
So your information also is not complete, but you could have easily pulled it. The 19 defendants, and that was the list that I wanted to look at, that you provided that had been in there for those long amounts of times, all, not some, 100% of them have competency issues. And so when you say they're in the jail, that's actually somewhat of a misnomer. They are certainly in custody, but they are in custody at Georgia Regional. I'm going to use initials so we don't talk about those defendants. One of the defendants you gave me was defendant DL. You'll be able to look at your list and
Mr.
figure out, Lowe, I think.
13 years.
Correct. He had murdered someone, was given a voluntary manslaughter sentence, was let out of jail. Guess what he did? He murdered someone else, and he has not been able to remain competent. And so there have been times that he has come up to Fulton County Jail because Georgia Regional has gotten him competent. He has always decompensated and gone back to a state of incompetency. Who determines competency is not the district attorney. It's actually not even the judge. It is a doctor. That means he is not competent to stay in trial. He's also clearly a very violent individual. In this murder that we have now, he was caught standing over the person with a knife. And so he is one of the 19 individuals, but that is 100% true for all 19 individuals that you asked. Each of them either has a homicide or a rape, or some of them both. One of the fact patterns I looked at from the defendants is a 60-year-old woman they helped to move, and then they came back, raped and murdered her. But they have not been competent since the time of that heinous crime. Therefore, most of their time that you're referring to as in custody, because they are in custody, has been at Georgia Regional. Every now and then, throughout periods of that time in custody, the doctors have gotten them competent. They've come back up to the court, tried to get on trial, and before they could be brought to trial, they would decompensate because they're truly incompetent individuals, meaning that they have competency issues. This is a larger problem in society, and I don't know what the exact solution is when you have people that are so severely mentally ill, extremely violent, not someone you want on the street, not someone your neighbor wants on the street, and so they've been held in custody, but not custody as in Rice Street. They've actually been at Georgia Regional. That was true for every single one of the 19 you gave me.
I think D'Anthony Tolbert also played a part in that as well. So I'm going to skip him because I'm imagining your answer is going to be similar of why it took almost 10 years to get to trial, because it was multiple competency issues. Is that correct?
Yes, there was only one person on your list that you asked about, and it seems like it's that name, so I want to make sure we're not mixing it. It took 4 years for them to get to trial.
I'm so sorry. I flipped the names. D'Anthony Tolbert was in jail. He was just found not guilty by a jury.
Yes, that was a co-defendant murder.
Right.
They were both charged with murder. Each of them multiple times fired counsel, had to keep getting new counsel, which was one reason of the delays. His co-defendant was found guilty of all the trial charges. He was cleared. And it wasn't just him that was firing counsel, him and his co-defendant. So that case got continued on and on. It also happened right through the pandemic. But that was the only one of those cases you had given me that it was not a competency issue. So any other one of those defendants that we won't say their names, but by initials, all of them were competency issues. And you don't have to rely on me for this. This is all in the court records that they multiple times were incompetent. Some of them have just stayed incompetent. Quite frankly, I think some of them will remain incompetent. They've remained incompetent for 13 years.
So how do you get them through the system if a judge is constantly identifying them as incompetent?
It's not a judge, it's a doctor.
Excuse me, a judge. Or
a
doctor, but the judge has to sign off on it, right?
So what happens is every 6 months they're evaluated. Every year by law they have to be brought back before the court. And that determination is, are you now competent for trial? If they are competent, then you put them on trial. And some people do in fact get moved through the court system. But whenever you see those heinously long sentences like that, or heinously long pretrial stay, you should always check, because for your 100% of the time, it was the exact same issue. It was issues of competency.
I'm going to go back to Mr. Tolbert, though, only because he was found not guilty and he waited 4.5 years for his trial date. What took so long?
I told you, he kept firing
but like
counsel.
in general, why does it take 4.5 years?
Well, you have to have a lawyer that's ready to stand trial with you. And if when it gets time to trial and motions, you fire that lawyer, you need a new lawyer, your co-defendant does. That is an odd case, that one that happened. And the murder that he was accused of, his co-defendant was found guilty of all. You know, obviously we brought charges, we believe they both were guilty, but we always respect the jury's opinion.
I want to make sure that I'm understanding the unindicted issue that you have when Commissioner Ellis is saying, you know, this is a travesty, this is, like, help me.
Commissioner Ellis is not a friend of the criminal justice system.
Help me better understand, like.
Do you know that he just voted that the federal government, who helps us on sexual assault cases, programs for children and things of that nature, that the federal government should stop giving that grant funding for a travesty that happened here in Fulton County, where thousands of rape kits from the 80s and 90s weren't tested. We've won lots of grant money on that. The federal government has been an amazing partner in making sure we have that grant money. We've removed serial rapists, and Commissioner Ellis votes that that's money we shouldn't get. I don't understand the way Commissioner Ellis thinks.
I'll ask him about that, but
Please do.
I want to make sure that I understand the unindicted numbers. Help me understand the process of you're saying that it's, yes, it's 90 days that they have the ability to have some sort of bond. Like,
no.
Tell me, I'm trying to better understand this.
No.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to say.
Sure.
I explained this to you, I think, over the phone. Bond and.
That's what I want her to explain to me. Yeah, that's what I want you to better just walk me through this.
Okay, so bond and unindicted status, zero to do with each other.
Okay.
Every time someone tells you bond and indictment status have something to do with each other, I want you to remember, by law, it has nothing to do with each other. The only thing that is relevant is, by law, if you're arrested, after 90 days, you are entitled to a bond.
Okay.
But unindicted, so when people are arrested, 85% of people here in Fulton County get a bond the day they're arrested, the first appearance, which happens within 72 hours. So that ought to tell you that bond and indictment status have nothing to do with each other. After 90 days, though, the law in Georgia is that one must be given a bond. So this trying to tie together unindicted cases and people in the jail, it's inaccurate. What Commissioner Ellis and other commissioners need to answer for, who have sat here, is the day the Fulton County Jail was built, it was inadequate. Why do I say that? that day it was at capacity. More so than that, the jail is literally falling apart. And so when you hear about people having shanks in jail, it's not that our sheriff is so inadequate that knives are getting in the jail, though sometimes that probably happens, but more so, the walls are literally falling apart. The metal is falling apart and they are using them. What they would like to do is to paint a scapegoat for inaction that they've taken. It is unconscionable the way that our jail is. They've known our jail is in that state. People need to be in safe conditions. I'm going to give you an anecdotal scenario that just happened. In my Saki unit, ironically, that unit we just talked about, where we're working cases where we find serial rapists and old sex cases, I sent 2 investigators to the jail. I sent them there for the purpose of doing a buccal swab. You know what that is, to get DNA inside of someone's mouth. They were looking for a particular defendant. We'll say Tom Smith. That's not the name, but we're just going to use that name. So they're calling out, Tom Smith, Tom Smith, Tom Smith. The defendant did not know for what reason they were at the jail. Why would he know? These are old, antiquated cases. The defendant, in a pod with other defendants, takes the door open to the cell. Says, that's me. Do you know how much danger my investigators were at? Do you know how much danger the deputies are in? The commissioners are well aware. We had a grand jury report written for them over a year ago that told them the jail needed help. The sheriff has literally begged them for help. What they would like is a scapegoat. This is what they need to deal with. The cases that we were given, we have made a 5,000 overall cut. That's with crime that went up right after the pandemic. Now crime is on the way back down. What they don't want to deal with is, because of our aggressive prosecution, crime is down 25% in this city. And you can say, Miss Willis, I've looked, crime is down all over the country. You would be right. But do you know what it's in other jurisdictions? 2 to 3%. Here it's double digits. Murders here, 20%. You want to know why? When I got here, there were over 200 people unindicted waiting on murder cases. All of them are either indicted or we looked at the evidence and declined them. The vast majority, we did record numbers of indictments on homicides. We're less than 50 now. Most of them are less than 90 days. We are not going to indict people until we properly investigate.
Do you think we need a new jail?
Do we need a new jail?
Well, I'm asking that because Pitts doesn't think we need a new jail.
And that's ridiculous. People shouldn't live in those conditions. We absolutely need a new jail. And every single month they wait, it's $18 million more.
And the reason why he says he doesn't think the county needs a new jail is because the moment it's built, it's going to be over capacity because of the backlog.
Well, he's inaccurate. One, we've been cutting the backlog, but more important than that, you need to build a jail that is in capacity with the city in which we live. And what you know is Fulton County is 1.2 million, but you also, I assume you live here, you play in this community. What you know that is we are really a community of 5 million. Why do I say that? Do I just pull that number out? No, this is a haven for where people come to work. It's a haven for where businesses are done. It's a wonderful place to be, and I invite people to be here. But as a result of that, when you get all that good and the benefit of Lenox Mall and the benefit of all the businesses and the restaurants, you also attract some bad elements. And so you have to have capacity. But we also have to have law enforcement with the resources that we need. You have to have a prosecutor's office that has enough lawyers and enough investigators. You have to have a public defender's office that has enough public defenders so that they can represent their clients adequately. You have to have enough judges. We do not have enough judges for this community.
I was going to ask you about that. Do you think?
Absolutely, we don't have enough judges. And they would like to paint the judges as lazy. The vast majority of our judges are not lazy. They're working very hard. They're trying to do their job. They're trying to do it with diligence. And they're trying to do things that are right for the community to keep us safe. They're trying to do things that are right by the defendants that come before them.
So you're saying that you think the judges are doing a good job for the most part. You just need more of them, or the county needs more? Because Chairman Pitts completely threw them under the bus, many of them saying that they simply are not doing their jobs.
But it's inadequate. It's just not truth. We have to deal with truth. And I would suggest to you that the real numbers that people should pull are, how many days are they at work? How many cases do they dispose of in a month? How many motions do they hear? Look at their work. It's not hard to do. All of their calendars are published, right? If we really wanted to get to the truth. But at some point, they are going to have to deal with the reality of they have not supplied enough resources. And this is historical. And so it's like the chickens are coming home to roost. Now you're dealing with and Commissioner Pitt sat on his hands for over a decade while they let that jail get into decay. This is not brand new news. It's not news. And I want you to understand me as a district attorney. I absolutely think that people should be in safe conditions. I absolutely think that they're human beings. They have a right to integrity. They have a right to be treated well, to be well fed, to be safe while they're in that environment. But I'm also going to tell you this. I didn't let my staff, I personally went through the list of the people in the jail. And we cleared out those that we could, right? When there are lesser charges. I certainly don't want to see those people. There's no reason that they should not be on bond while they await to meet their day in court. But a lot, like the very vast majority of them, have more than one case. That's sometimes a scenario. They have acts of violence. They're a danger to the community, and judges have to make tough decisions. And what you'll be here doing, and I mean you in the greater sense, reporters, is if they get out of jail and they already stabbed one person or shot one person and shot someone else, you'll be asking the question, there's a reason crime is down 25%. It's because you have a DA that's not playing with games. I'm not playing on the issue of human trafficking, and I'm not going to apologize for holding violent people in jail. I'm also not going to apologize for saying this office needs adequate resources.
What
and
else
the
do you
judges
need?
need adequate resources. We need more investigators and more lawyers and legal support staff that can support them. Now, I'll tell you something. We would not be in the good condition that we're at and cutting that backlog by all of those. If you just do the math, 18,000 to 11,000, had it not been for that ORCA funding. But the ORCA funding, well, you know what that is, the ARPA.
Yes, the one-time $75 million.
Correct. It expires next year. The county is going to have to chip in and make sure that those people remain employed so we can continue to do this work. And we were never able, because it was a melting pot and we had to compromise, we were never given what we totally asked for. The county is going to have to give those resources to keep moving. The other thing is the state of Georgia is going to have to look at Fulton County and deal with the fact that Fulton County needs more judges. And while I'm making a plug, the GBI is terribly understaffed. One of the reasons for the backlog is, first of all, the public does not realize this. If you're arrested today and you're arrested with meth, heroin, and cocaine, because of the backlog at the GBI makes a decision to test one. So they're going to, let's say they'll test the cocaine. I got to let the heroin and the meth go. I'll never have any evidence to prove that you actually had meth and cocaine. In addition
Why
to
do they have to let it go? Or
they
why do
won't they won't test it. So
Because they don't have enough resources
they don't have
to test?
enough resources to test it. So they only test one of the three drugs. This is one of the reasons Atlanta is trying to get their own crime lab, because they won't test all three substances. Let me tell you worse than that. The one substance that they caught on you that they're going to test, because they're not testing the other two, the one that they are going to test, we're going to wait 6 months on a lab. Well, I can't indict somebody if I don't know it's cocaine. So I have to wait on that lab result before I can actually get it done. Do you understand what I'm saying? Police make an arrest. You run in a grocery store, but your grocery store has 3 and 4 different kinds of drugs. They endanger their lives. Take those drugs to the GBI. The GBI then has to make a difficult decision. We'll test one of these. I, as the prosecutor, can only charge what I have evidence for.
And
I think
that's why
that's
maybe
ethical.
some of these, like when you say you used to get a fax, or the previous administration used to get a fax and they had died on the fax, you're saying you're waiting for things like
the
laptops.
scientific
Okay.
evidence, because it is wrong, and a lot of times those drugs aren't drugs.
So I want to make
It's
sure
what they
that
would call on the street flex. It might be baking powder.
So I want to make sure that I understand some of the contributing factors of, you're saying, the backlog and the overcrowding in the jail. You're saying you don't have you need more resources yourself, and you're saying this as you're waiting to potentially hope to keep funding that the ORCA provided. You're saying the
That
county
must
needs
stay.
more judges as well.
Absolutely.
What else
they
am
need
I
more
missing?
They need more judges, and the state needs to fund the GBI, because it's not, we
GBI,
just
so it's
talked
those
about
three.
one issue. We're not
Okay.
just talking about drugs. I use drugs as an
Yeah.
example. There's also a backlog on sexual assault kits. There's also a backlog on ballistics evidence. Please do not take this as a criticism for the scientists at the GBI. They're amazing. Excellent.
There's just not enough of them.
There's
That's what you're
just
saying.
not enough of
So,
them.
Again, I just want to make sure that I hone down on, the focus of this story is, why is the jail the way it is? Why is it overcrowded? And
Well, one reason that I would say the first reason that it's overcrowded is because it was inadequate the day it was built,
Okay.
meaning it was not large enough. The second reason is they have allowed the jail to get into a state of disrepair. The third reason is our sheriff needs more staff so that he can keep them safe. So he's got to
But
be
that
able
has
to
nothing to
pay
do with overcrowding.
competitively.
I mean, I know that the facility itself you're saying was never adequate from the
It wasn't
beginning.
big enough.
But I'm talking about the backlog, and you're saying.
But if unindicted cases and indicted have nothing to do with each other, what I'm telling you is we have people.
I'm just saying getting cases moving,
Through the
getting
system.
getting the trial.
You need judges.
And okay, you're saying judges, you're saying more resources, and you're saying more resources for GBI. Those are your three things, or is there anything
And the
more?
public defender, you have to have enough lawyers. Even the conflict defender has problems right now. And a conflict defender becomes necessary when there's more one defendant on a case. So if 5 people get arrested together, what happens
They
is
all need their own separate attorney.
Correct.
So
The
how
public
big of a problem is the lack of public defenders?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. You know, and I'm here advocating for a public defender because that's just right. It's just justice. People deserve to be represented. I've been a defense attorney. That's very important work. People deserve to have competent counsel. And I'm not suggesting that the lawyers there are not competent, but they are certainly overburdened. They certainly have too many cases. They have to be able to adequately prepare. People are facing very lengthy sentences. These aren't misdemeanors that we're dealing with. You're talking about people looking at 5, 10, 20 years to life. They have to be able to adequately prepare. You should talk to Mr. Kenner about what they say the numbers are for public defenders, how many clients they should have. They've just recently come out with the numbers and what they actually have. How can they do their job adequately?
I want to talk to you a little bit more. I'd love to get your response to some criticism about these multi-defendant indictments that your office is doing. YSL, the election interference. Some say, or they see, you quickly trying to get those to trial where there are individuals at the jail that have been waiting years for their cases to go to trial. When you look at it, that some people say that's not fair.
But when people file speedy trial demands, no matter what level of case it is, we have a case right now that the public will never pay attention to. Speedy trial, it's a complex case, meaning a trial division case, so not a sexual assault, not a murder case. That defendant filed a speedy on time and we'll have to try him. And so those cases are always going to take precedent where defense attorneys file them. I don't think we are trying to move those cases any faster than any of the others. I guess it just depends on who the criticism comes from. Some say we took too long.
I think it's criminal defense attorneys who have defendants in the jail or out of the jail just waiting years for their case to go to trial.
Each of them could have filed a speedy trial demand. They know the process, and if they had done that, their case would have been brought to trial quickly.
They weren't able to even do that up until like last year. Chief Glanville put a stay on those speedy trials.
Well, that was for the entire state.
Yeah.
Glanville did it for us. But what was to happen during COVID when you couldn't bring juries here to hear cases because people would die? So that is not something that lays on the foot of anyone. It was a pandemic in this country.
What else specifically could you use or have in your office to get cases moving? You said you need more investigators. Like, tell me why that's important for more investigators, more prosecutors. Just simplify it for the public.
When police make a case, they do it to the standard of probable cause, which is the lowest standard in the law. They have, I see you do something, I say you did it. That's it. That's enough for the police to arrest. We live in a time where juries demand more, and they deserve more. And so what happens once the police make that arrest is the case has to be investigated. So my investigators are police officers. They're all former police officers. They will work with the police, and they will work outside of the work that the police did to make sure that we put those cases together. So they do very important work. Without their work, we would get a lot less convictions. My office conviction rate is right now 93%, trying some very difficult cases. Then you need lawyers to try those cases and to analyze them. Defendants do have a right to be treated fairly. It is unfair to charge people with crimes, felony crimes, and give them that scarlet letter of an indictment if they did not in fact do it. In fact, what we find is about 12% of all of the cases that the police bring that we do not pursue, that we either decline them altogether or we find it's appropriate to send them to diversion. And then when I first became the district attorney, we also found that there was no reason to indict people to send them to accountability court. So you have 12% of the cases that may go to accountability court. Those are for our veterans or people that have drug problems or mental health problems, or to diversion. Those are usually for young offenders. But sometimes older people that make really bad mistakes, but it's just a mistake, and we think we can rehabilitate them. And sometimes the evidence is just not there. The police got the wrong person once you dig a little deeper, and they're declined. And so people have a right to do that. They may not seem like a lot, because what does that tell you? 88% of the time we're going to bring the charges that the police got. But if you are in that 12%, you want to make sure you don't get that indictment. And that ends up being a lot of people.
What are we not talking about that you think is important? Because I guess what I'm sitting back and I'm thinking, if Commissioner Ellis or other commissioners are voicing frustration about the unindicted number at the jail, and you're saying you're looking at this completely wrong, are you having conversations with them? Are you trying to educate them of what you're saying is the truth?
Yes, we have tried to have sit-down conversations where we educate them. Some of the commissioners are very receptive and very supportive to what is going on. There's not a commissioner, no one wants to see people harmed. And so I'm not going to cast that disparagement, right? But when you do nothing, that's what happens. The jail is inadequate. You have no argument here. I support the sheriff in getting a new jail. In fact, I think it's unfair that the conditions that he was given when he first got here and that he continues to have to try to maintain. So I will not argue with that. But also, there has got to be a reality that you have to have people to do the job. Atlanta is a major metropolitan city, but it's not the only major metropolitan city. I think I have 5 of the biggest cities in the state of Georgia, all here. They're populous, things happen. We need the people to do the job. We've done amazing work. It's not enough. Things are not perfect. I'm not going to say that they are perfect, but they are a hell of a lot better than when I got here. And you know that by just simply looking at the numbers and seeing what they were and what they are now. The work that we've been able to do in the community, restricting people's records, making sure that people can get jobs, making sure that we are indicting the most dangerous felons. You asked me about multiple defendant cases. I'm going to keep bringing multiple defendant cases. You want to know why? Gangs are causing 80% of our crimes, and they're stronger together. And they're going to be indicted together, held responsible together, so that juries get full pictures of the harm that they're doing, because they're doing everything from running drugs to killing people to human trafficking to employment fraud. And so I'm not going to apologize for bringing indictments that tell the full story.
Anything else that you can think of?
I'm
Just
glad
going
that
through
you're
my
covering
notes.
this
Yeah.
issue. I think it's important. I think that it's very important, though, that when people look at those defendants with those, because that 19 was concerning, right? When you look at that time frame, it's very concerning until you
Does
understand.
it frustrate you that it's 19 defendants who have been waiting 5 years for their day in court? Is that frustrating even for you?
What's frustrating for me is also those victims lost their lives or they were raped. And their families are looking at us and they're wanting justice for their dead loved ones.
What do you tell them?
Because that's what in multiple cases, that I can't hold the person who did this to your loved one accountable because they're not mentally competent to stand trial. And until a doctor says they're mentally competent, they cannot stand trial. But the public should not think that those people are sitting over at Rice Street, because that's inaccurate. They're sitting at Georgia Regional trying to be made competent so that they can deal with their charges, or declared insane if they were in fact insane at the time of the crime. But that is why you see those 19, and it's just important that the truth be told about it.
I've had a criminal defense attorney once tell me that, especially when the Chief Glanville had the order to stay speedy trial, he compared the facility to Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay, because there are people in that facility that have been waiting years for trial, some of them never officially charged. When you hear that comparison, what goes through your mind?
Well, I haven't seen that facility, so I don't like to speak about things that I don't know about. But for the 19 that have been there that length of time, I think we have to be fair. You can't try people that aren't mentally competent. And the reason you can't try people that aren't mentally competent is they can't help their attorneys. And every defendant should be able to assist their attorney when preparing their defense. And so that is the way the law is set up, like it or not. I think that what you've hit on is a much bigger issue in society. It is, what do we do with all of the mentally ill people that we have? Some of them that pose a danger to all of us, some of them that pose a danger to themselves. As you came in the courthouse this morning, across the street from me, every single morning my heart is broken because I see all of those homeless people. And I know that most of those homeless people suffer from some type of mental deficiency. They're struggling, correct? That's not appropriate for them to be homeless. It's not appropriate that probably 40% of our jail and the prison system is housed with the mentally ill. And so what are we going to do about that greater issue? But this is the truth. While the law remains what it is, while we deal with mental illness the way we are, you can come back 10 years from now and it may not be that 19, but it'll be another 19 that have been in jail for a very long time. They've done something heinous, removed someone's loved one from this earth, can't be held accountable, and are just in limbo.
What would you suggest be the solution, knowing that no one's going to fix the competency issue? There's always going to be people accused of crimes, heinous crimes, and their competency is going to be in question. But you can't hold them in pre-trial detention for years or 13 years. So what would you suggest happen?
Well, you can hold them, and you have to because of the safety issues.
But they should be either in a appropriate facility.
So we're
or
talking.
prison.
I'm not the governor, right? But if I was the governor, one of the things that I would do is I would address the issue of mental illness in this state. We need facilities that really take care of our mentally ill people and really get them the treatment they need. Why is that so important? If you had treatment centers for people, one, a lot of these crimes wouldn't have happened in the first place, and we wouldn't be having this awful conversation if they got the services that they need. If we supported families that had mentally ill people in their system, if we really offered them the support we need. You know, I tell people all the time, defund the police was one of the worst slogans of all time, but some of the messaging behind it was very good. What they recognized is that our law enforcement community needed mental health professionals so that they could aid the police when going to deal with someone that was really suffering from a mental health breakdown. So if I was in a position to do that, I would make sure that not just Atlanta Police Department, but every police department through this state had mental health professionals. So many of the police shootings that we see involve people that are mentally ill. And it's not a novice idea that I just came up with. If you look at Houston, they have a large contingency of people that are on the police force that just deal with the mentally ill. And what they have found is it cuts down on police shootings and it makes sure that society stays safe. It's not the perfect solution. They'll tell you they don't have enough of them, but they have some. And so we have got to deal with the issue of mental illness. So one of the things that we did for the first time in history when I came here was we went to the court, and the court graciously agreed that we needed to run 2 grand juries. And so when I was here as an ADA, we had 1 grand jury. They met every Tuesday and Friday, and they did cases. I knew that that was not going to be enough. We're not going to be able to get things done like that. And so since March of my first year, for every term, we've run 2 grand juries. We have what we call a grand jury A and a grand jury B. Grand jury A sits on Monday and Tuesday and hears cases. Grand jury B runs on Thursday and Friday and
you had never had that before?
That had never been true before, and we did that so we could cut through this backlog, and it's worked very, very efficiently. Although I understand last week my grand jury was like, we gotta go, we have to go. We're mentally tired because we're working them very, very hard. They're very admirable citizens who sit and do that for a 2-month period, but that is something that has helped to cut down on the backlog because it is much better than it was, but it needs to get better.
I was about to say, when I first got the complete number of unindicted and indicted felony cases awaiting trial, it was 18,000. That was in December of last year. As of August of this year, it's increased an additional 5,000 cases.
So we're working. I mean, that's what it tells you. We're working every day. We're indicting and accusing cases and declining cases every single day. It is the largest division of this office.
Any idea why it increased 5,000?
Well, it's for two reasons. I think when you all requested the information, you had a new clerk and you got the numbers that were both indicted and not on judicial hold. So the judges have put cases on what they call judicial hold for various reasons, but those are indicted cases. I think that they gave you the total numbers that belong to each judge. So I think before what you were getting was the number that did not include the judicial holds, and I think they've given you all of the indicted cases. And the number of indictments we've done has dramatically increased each year.
Tell me why it's important that you mentioned judicial holds.
Because those are cases that are in the system. Those are defendants that have got to be dealt with. They're people that committed crimes in our community.
And the judges are putting them on the back burner.
And for different reasons. Sometimes, you know, you'll have to talk to the judges about why they did it. Sometimes they'll put a person on judicial hold because they don't have a good address for them. That reason drives me crazy. And the reason as a DA it drives me crazy is the defendant is responsible for providing their address to the court and keeping the clerk updated. There are different reasons, though, that a defendant may be put on judicial hold, always usually over the state's objection. But those are cases that were indicted, which means we found that there was a good case to pursue, and judges have decided for various reasons to put them on judicial hold.
It sounds like you guys keep a lot of data points. You track a lot of things. Do you track the number of cases that you've declined to prosecute?
I am sure we could track that number, but it's not something that what I always track is how many cases are remaining and how many cases are you doing. What I tell my lawyers to do is just look at the case fairly, to evaluate the evidence. I don't ever want them to feel like you've got to indict this many cases, you have to decline this many cases, you have to send this many cases to diversion, you have to send this many cases to accountability court. As I tell them, and this is something that is a really important lesson, in each file is a person being charged life. That's a huge thing to do. Mm-hmm. There's a victim's life, there's the witness, and there's a community. And so the minute that you start looking at these cases as just files, it's time for you to get out of this business. You always have to look at those people as individuals and to look at what happened. Did we actually have a crime? And then as a lawyer, you have to be very analytical. Can you prove it? That's one of the frustrating things of being a prosecutor. Sometimes you feel like they did it, but you don't have the evidence to prove they did it. And in those cases, we have to decline. Sometimes we decline.
Well, why not track how many cases you're declining to prosecute?
I'm sure we could go back, but what I've been very meticulous about tracking indictments and tracking the number of open cases, and I follow those jail numbers. They keep me up at night.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if you track the number of cases that you declined to prosecute, there might be some sort of pattern, like or to a particular department or a particular officer or something. If
we see problems with officers, I have very, very good relationships with my chiefs of police, so I will go and talk to them and say that this officer is a problem or that officer is a problem. Sometimes we have had problems in like a category of maybe officers not taking drugs to the lab, and that's a no-no because I've told you how long it takes to get the drugs tested, so it's very important that when they make an arrest within days, certainly if not the same day, within 72 hours or so, that those drugs get to the lab. Those are categorical problems. The other things I've found to be individual.
Ever wondered why you should get an LLC with a third party when you can do it all by yourself? Yeah, of course. Those companies.
It's so interesting sitting down with so many individuals that are the top elected individuals in Fulton County's criminal justice system, and they all say different things of why the jail the way it is. The sheriff will say, I'm caught in the middle. I'm just supposed to house them. Yes, I need a new jail, but like he believes that the problem will still exist, the overcrowding issue because of the court backlog. When you ask Chairman Pitts, he says, it's the judges. They're not doing enough. They're lazy, or some of them are lazy. When I reach out, when you give me your explanation, it's multiple things. I need more resources. We need more judges. We need more resources at GBI. Why is it so impossible to get a consensus of what's What's the problem?
Well, Commissioner Pitts has not been to law school and he's never worked a day in the criminal justice system. So he's really not in a position to give an analysis of what's being done or what's not being done. I can never recall a day that Commissioner Pitts sat and watched court proceedings. So it's an unfair statement to say you at least have to be a part of a problem and a part of the solution. And so I think it's unfair. People don't want to say that. They also have been, in my opinion, a penny smart and a dollar dumb. It would have been better many years ago to invest in an adequate facility and to invest in these law enforcement partners in a way that they needed. What do I mean by that? To give the public defender the lawyers that they needed to adequately do their job, to fund the district attorney's office in a way that they could appropriately do the backlog of cases. Do I think my predecessor was derelict in some duties? They could have done a better job maybe with the resources, yes, but I also think he did not have enough resources. That is just the truth. I think that that is the reason that you had cases going back to 2014. I also think he spent a lot of time kind of chasing this jail number, and then you had 85% of the people getting bonds and not being indicted. And when people don't get held accountable, guess what they do? They commit another crime. So often. So many of the people that you see, if I would randomly pick, 100 people out of the jail, look and see how many of them have prior arrest and how many prior arrests. Look, when you look at those records and see if the things that they have prior arrest, do they concern you? As a citizen, when you look at their records and you see burglaries and aggravated assaults, do you want those kind of people held responsible? I have to tell you, I'm out in the community a lot. I'm everywhere from South Fulton to North Fulton. I have a county that is extremely diverse. It's one reason I love this county. We're African American, we're Caucasian, we're Asian, we're Indian. We are very, very educated. Some of us are more blue collar workers. We are different sexualities. We are different genders. We're all of those things. But what I consistently hear, it doesn't matter where I'm at in the county or who's sitting across from me, everybody wants to be safe. Everybody wants to be safe. And everybody wants people that break into their houses, that hurt people, held responsible. And I really consider it an honor to sit here. It's really a privilege. Heavy is the head that wears this crown. It's a lot of responsibility, but I am not going to charge people that should not be charged. I'm also not going to allow people to be victimized and not hold people accountable. And so you have to go about it doing it the right way. And so everybody talks about they want to be tough on crime. But I've told the governor he won't be surprised if you go to him and says the DA says you need to give more money to the GBI. He'll say, I've heard that before, because it's the truth.
Is there any, it just seems like so many people are on different pages. Is there a discussion to say, let's get together in the same room and talk this out? Fact, fiction, here's why it is from my perspective, and then people clarifying their positions. Is there talk to do that?
I think there is some talk. You asked me, do we have those conversations with commissioners? We have over there, at least 4 commissioners that listen, that will drill you. I tell people, if you ever want to go to court, go sit in front of Commissioner Natalie Hall. Commissioner Natalie Hall wants to know the numbers. She wants to know the facts. She wants to know how she can help. She wants to know what needs to be done for the community. The mighty Khadijah from District 6, she is the same way. Commissioner Arrington, Commissioner Barrett, they want to understand the problem, and they want it in great detail. Commissioner Arrington, of course, he's the easiest to talk to. He's a criminal lawyer. He understands the problem. He really understands the criminal justice system. So I can have the conversation with him in 30 minutes because he gets some of the fundamental issues.
And why isn't he clarifying to Commissioner Ellis the issue if he knows it?
I think that he does clarify the issue.
Because he's not, like 2 days ago when he threw out this number of the unindicted, he's not saying anything.
Well, I think that Commissioner Arrington and Commissioner Ellis are having those conversations, but I think that they're, the agenda is that we want to say things. I have told Commissioner Ellis point blank that this is not just a South Fulton problem. This is not just an Atlanta problem. Before I spoke with you, I was in Roswell. You want to know why? We've done a human trafficking sting for the last few days. We did it in Roswell, Johns Creek, all of North Fulton. Guess what we found? human traffickers. We've been working on that project for 6 months. And so people want to pretend like they live in a bubble where crime does not impact them, but everybody can get in a car and crime impacts everyone all through this county. And he needs to be behind initiatives that keep the community safe. It is disgusting to me that he would say or vote against something that allowed the federal government to give money to find serial rapists. Who would be against that? That's crazy.
Did he say why?
I don't know. I think it's a political agenda.
Did you end up still getting the money?
Oh yeah, the federal government is completely support. Our SAKI program here in Fulton County has been acclaimed because we are doing such great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.